Hello, my name is Lauren Serrano, and my research project is on differences in a country's level of economic growth. So, for my introduction, my main hypothesis is that the lower a country's environmental standards, the higher its rate of economic growth is. And so, for an example of this, I found in the specific case studies I did about China that when they started increasing international trade and unsustainable methods of production and stuff like that would increase their economic growth as they kept producing more. And some of the methods I'll be using is content analysis, scaling, and comparative case studies. For my literature review, some of the topics I'll be focusing on is going to be green growth as a sustainable option, China as an example of unsustainability, and why or why not some countries may have higher or lower economic growth. So to continue this and go into more detail, for the topic of green growth, I found two articles written by authors Thomas in the year 2015 and Lay 2004. And in these articles, they discuss sustainable production and like how that can impact a country's economic growth. And like Lay states that continued economic growth can be good for the environment. So, but mainly if a country does decide to participate in more green production, and that would be like solar panels and like more sustainable options of like producing energy and stuff like that, then that can be good for their economy. And for my next one on China, I found two articles by the authors Cao and Hossein, 2015 and 2007, and both of them discuss how China has been participating, along with other countries, in unsustainable production. And Hossein states that regulations would decrease growth for some countries, especially developing countries. So it would be easier for countries with really high GDPs and like big economies to start using more green ways to produce, because they already have such a high economy that it wouldn't decrease their growth. And it would be better for the environment and everyone if they start doing that. And then one example of why some countries may have higher or lower growth is because of like the governmental style of the country. And so the articles I found on this topic cover authoritarian regimes and dictators. And so Joseph, 2008, and Papaioanou, 2015, discussed this and economic effects that these variables will cause. So I believe that they discuss that if the authoritarian regime stays longer, it can decrease the economic growth, and same with how long a dictator stays in office. And this research builds on my previous research because it includes examples of economic growth in different ways, and it includes variables that relate to my hypotheses. So my first hypothesis is the lower a country's environmental standards, the higher its economic growth. And my second one is the more a country harvests its natural resources, like oil, the higher rate of economic growth. And my theory is that due to the evidence proven that economic growth increases when unsustainable production also increases, that overall supports my claims. For my statistical method, the unit of analysis, I use the number of cases equals number of countries. So the main variables are environmental standards, interval ratio, country's governmental style, nominal, oil extraction levels, interval ratio, solar power levels, interval ratio, and the level of citizens that believe in global warming, nominal. And then for operationalization, environmental standards can be measured by the level of sustainable resources a country has or how much a country produces sustainable products. The governmental style can be measured by content analysis. Oil extraction levels can be measured by measuring like the numerically highest to lowest levels of oil extracted in a country, and solar power levels can be measured the same way. And then level of citizens that believe in global warming can be measured through scaling. For the control variables, I use education level, which is a theory identifying the literature review, population level, generic control variable, level of citizens that believe in global warming and direct causation, region, general control variable, and unemployment level, theory identified in lit review. The secondary method I chose to use is content analysis on the type of government a country has. And so time frame would be used to measure recent government types in countries. So like over decades, like what was the style of government and did it change, and like was there a dictator or was it democracy? And then the content analysis would be conducted by measuring, comparing all this data of all the countries in the world, and then seeing like and comparing the types of government. The unit of analysis is each country, and then the scores will be communicated by the data of how many countries are either like democratic or authoritarian. My expected findings and conclusion sums up to be that if I was to perform my statistical analysis, I would probably assume that the variables being measured would be relevant to my hypothesis because of the variables used and how they relate to my hypothesis, which is the more like unsustainable a country is, the higher their economic growth is going to be. But it does depend on the country and the specific variable being measured because, for example, like if the country's democratic and if the country's authoritarian, the results are going to be different. And if I was to perform the secondary method, it'll give me a lot of helpful information on governmental styles that I'd be able to apply to my research. For my budget on this research project, I would probably assume that it would be pretty expensive because of how wide the variables and methods range, because it is comparing every country in the world, and that would take a lot of time. So the timeline would also be probably a couple of years, I would assume, and the price would probably be pretty expensive. This is the bibliography for my project, and it just sums up everything and all of the articles that I mentioned.